Far away in time, during the long depths of the Ice Age, coastlines stretch outward far beyond their present reach. Vast amounts of water lie locked within continental ice sheets, spreading across northern lands. With the seas pulled back, the edges of continents extend like wide terraces, revealing plains that today lie hidden beneath waves. These landscapes form the stage upon which early humans begin their journeys toward islands and distant coasts. The air is colder, and the climate less forgiving. But for many groups of early humans, these are years of opportunity. The retreat of the sea uncovers paths along coasts and channels that will one day vanish. A step here, a crossing there, and the pattern of migration begins to shift. Archaeologists now trace the evidence of these early movements, piecing together fragments of stone, charcoal, and bone. On some ancient shorelines, they find tools that once lay far inland. The shape of the land has changed so dramatically since those days that many sites remain lost beneath the modern sea. Yet the surviving traces show that humans did not merely stay confined to large continents. They pushed outward, drawn by necessity, by curiosity, and by the shifting map of the Ice Age world. As glaciers expand, the Earth itself transforms. Winds grow stronger, rain patterns alter, and deserts stretch further. Yet the lowering of sea levels, in some places by more than 100 meters, exposes land bridges that connect regions once separated by water. Where today one finds straits and channels, in those times broad valleys and plains stretch across. The Sunda Shelf in Southeast Asia becomes an immense extension of land, joining the islands of Sumatra, Java, and Borneo to the Asian mainland. To the south, the Sahul continent emerges, uniting Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania into a single landmass. Between them lies Wallacea, a scattering of islands that even during the lowest sea levels remain separated by deep channels. This archipelago forms both a barrier and a bridge. For humans hoping to reach Sahul, there is no choice but to cross open water. No land bridge ever forms there. That fact alone makes this moment in history so significant. The first sections of these journeys are not leaps into the unknown. People follow shorelines as they always have, gathering shellfish, fishing in tidal pools, and seeking wood from drift logs carried down rivers. Shorelines offer food and visibility, and they also offer pathways, open routes where dense forest does not block movement. With coasts pulled outward, such corridors lengthen. Fossil pollen tells of shifting vegetation. Mangrove forests grow further outward, fringing lagoons and estuaries. Grasses spread across newly exposed plains, where animals roam. Herds of deer, giant monitor lizards, and smaller mammals adapt to these changing environments. Humans follow, always close to water, always dependent upon its presence. One remarkable clue comes from archaeological finds in Timor and Alor, islands on the southern edge of Wallacea. There, stone tools and shell middens date back more than 40,000 years. Their presence implies deliberate sea crossings, for these islands could never be reached on foot. Even the lowest seas leave channels many kilometers wide. Some researchers debate whether the first crossings were intentional or accidental. Perhaps storms carried groups away from one shore to another. Yet the repeated presence of human activity on such islands suggests planning. Another piece of evidence lies in obsidian, a volcanic glass prized for its sharp edges. On some islands, geochemical analysis reveals obsidian that originates only from distant sources. This proves movement across water, for the stones could not arrive by natural drift alone. The transport may have been slow, passing from group to group, yet it confirms that human networks extended across seas. Still, much remains uncertain. The construction of early watercraft leaves almost no trace. Wood, vines, and reeds rot away. Archaeologists cannot recover the rafts or dugouts that surely existed. Instead, they reconstruct possibilities through experiment, noting how simple bundles of bamboo or logs can float with stability. Ethnographic studies of later seafaring peoples provide analogies, though none can perfectly match the distant past. The mystery of the earliest boats remains unsolved, a hidden chapter in human ingenuity. At the planetary scale, the world of these pioneers looks profoundly different. Glaciers cover vast tracts of North America and Eurasia, reflecting sunlight back into space, cooling the climate further. Ocean currents shift, changing the distribution of warmth and moisture. In the tropics, monsoon systems weaken, bringing drought to some regions and concentrating rainfall in others. Sea levels, 100 meters lower, redraw every coast. Bays deepen, river mouths lengthen, continental shelves widen into new hunting grounds. Imagine the distances involved. The gap between Asia and Sahul, even at its narrowest, spans more than 80 kilometers of open water when measured from island to island. A migration of such scale equals the distance from Paris to Brussels. But across restless seas rather than stable land, for small groups of hunter-gatherers, this step marks one of the boldest achievements of their age. The humans who live along these changing coasts are anatomically modern, bearing the same capacities as people today. Their survival depends on adaptability. They fashion tools from stone, bone, and shell. They use fire for cooking and protection. They exploit tidal rhythms, learning when fish are trapped in pools and when mollusks can be gathered in abundance. On exposed continental shelves, they hunt animals that later vanish as seas rise. Every resource matters, and every choice carries weight. Some questions remain forever beyond reach. Did these groups set out with purpose, aiming for islands glimpsed on the horizon? Or did accidents, storms, and currents deliver them, with survival ensuring that the chance became a tradition? Scholars debate, yet all agree that by 40 to 50,000 years ago, humans had reached islands and continents across open water. Their presence in Sahul proves that at least one crossing succeeded, and probably many. Thus the stage is set. As the Ice Age locks seas into ice and stretches land outward, humans begin to edge across watery boundaries. They leave behind traces of fire, tools, and bones scattered like faint footprints along coasts now drowned. These marks of life speak quietly across the ages, reminders of the moment when humanity first learned to push beyond the familiar shore, to treat the ocean not as a boundary, but as a pathway. At the edge of the great Ice Age seas, horizons stretch further than they do today. The air is clear, and from certain high points, dark outlines appear on the distance of the water. These are islands, some only ridges of volcanic stone, others broad masses covered with forest. For the humans who move along exposed coasts, these distant shapes raise questions. Are they empty? Are they rich with food? Are they reachable at all? The very sight of another shore creates possibilities. Humans are visual beings, sensitive to patterns, always alert to change in their surroundings. When a new line breaks the flat horizon, curiosity awakens. Some may climb ridges or dunes to see better, watching how the islands shift shape with clouds and light. By day, they might glimpse the shimmer of waves breaking on hidden reefs. At night, they may notice faint silhouettes against the starlit sky. Archaeological evidence confirms that humans recognized and sought out these distant lands. Sites on islands across Wallacea contain stone tools whose raw materials originate elsewhere. Obsidian flakes, identified by their chemical signatures, show movement between islands separated by open water. For such transport to occur repeatedly, people must have seen, remembered, and deliberately aimed for new horizons. The act of seeing, however, does not guarantee success. Waterways are dangerous and storms unpredictable. The gap between one coast and another may span only tens of kilometers, yet in small craft, this distance becomes immense. Scholars suggest that many attempts may have failed, with groups lost to currents and winds. Yet enough succeeded that by 45,000 years ago, humans had established themselves across Sahul, the great continent of Australia and New Guinea. The first sightings may not have been limited to Wallacea. On the Sunda Shelf, with seas drawn back, islands stood closer than they do today. Even then, channels remained. From one shore, people could see another. The site itself becomes a form of map. Early humans do not possess compasses or charts, but their eyes trace landmarks, and their memories hold them. A lesser-known clue comes from the study of wind and wave patterns. Oceanographers have reconstructed how currents moved during the Ice Age. In some seasons, steady winds may have carried rafts towards Sahul with less resistance than today. To eyes on a shore, the direction of waves and the flight of seabirds offered guidance. Birds in particular matter. Flocks rise in morning light and fly outward, returning at dusk. Observing these rhythms, humans could infer that other lands lie within reach. The mystery remains, were the first crossings accidental or intentional? Some researchers argue that storms may have swept groups from one island to another, stranding them in unfamiliar places. Others suggest that the repeated presence of humans on remote islands proves intent. They aimed for what they saw, trusting their rafts and their knowledge of stars, winds and birds. Perhaps both were true. Accidents occurred, but skill grew, and over generations, the sight of a distant island shifted from danger to opportunity. Planetary conditions shape this entire story. With ice covering vast continents, sunlight reflects outward, cooling global temperatures. Sea levels remain 100 meters lower, expanding continental shelves and altering perspectives. Horizons stretch further, revealing islands that modern humans cannot see from the same coasts. This expansion of vision itself plays a role. A world with wider horizons encourages thoughts of movement, of reaching what seems almost within grasp. To understand the scale, imagine the distances involved. From Timor to the first stepping islands towards Sahul, crossings may span 80 to 100 kilometers. From Malor to Pantar, smaller gaps exist, but none vanish completely. No land bridge closes these seas. A human group must gather wood, bind vines, a trust in floating bundles. The distance equals the length of a modern river valley or a stretch between major cities. But the challenge lies in water, not land. Life along the coasts prepares them. Shorelines offer a daily education in tides, currents, and drift. People see logs carried out, then return days later on distant beaches. They notice fish shoals that move with the pull of the moon. They mark the flight paths of birds and the movements of clouds. Each observation feeds a growing awareness that seas connect as much as they divide. On certain islands, caves preserve traces of this life, Layers of shells and bones show repeated use over thousands of years. Some contain remains of giant rats, once hunted for food, and extinct birds now known only through fossils. Fireplaces of ash mark the places where people warmed themselves against sea winds. The presence of tools made from distant stone suggests that these groups did not remain isolated. They crossed again and again, sustaining links across channels. A remarkable find on Alor Island reveals fish bones from deep-sea species dating back more than 40,000 years. These bones come from tuna and other fast swimmers which cannot be caught in shallow water. Their presence proves that humans had developed methods to fish far from shore. Such evidence pushes back the timeline of advanced maritime skills. It shows that by the time humans reached Sahul, they already possessed knowledge of the open sea. And yet mysteries linger. No traces of boats survive, no paddles, no ropes, no sails. The materials vanish quickly in tropical climates. What remains are shadows, stone, shell, bone, and the chemistry of obsidian. From these fragments, scholars reconstruct a story of sight and crossing, but the full appearance of the first craft, the techniques of navigation, and the courage behind each departure remain hidden. At the largest scale, the Earth continues to shift. Tectonic forces raise and lower islands, altering the pathways humans see. Volcanoes erupt, shaping new silhouettes on the horizon. Earthquakes create tsunamis that wash across coasts, reminders of the power of the ocean. For people standing on the shore, every change becomes part of memory, shaping when and where to attempt the next journey. Thus, the sight of distant lands becomes more than curiosity. It becomes a call, a reminder that the world is larger than the immediate shore. The presence of humans on Sahul proves that they answered this call. They saw, they remembered, and they tried again and again until crossing water became part of human survival. The story of islands begins with a glance toward the horizon, with the first recognition that another world lies within view. Along the ancient coasts, humans face a question unlike any before. How can they move across stretches of water that no land bridge will ever close? The answer begins with the simplest of materials. Fallen trunks, tied bundles of reeds, and lashed branches serve as the first watercraft. No traces survive in the ground, for wood and fiber decay. Yet the logic is clear. To cross, they must float, and to float, they must build. The earliest rafts are likely little more than bundles of buoyant wood, perhaps bamboo, bound together with vines. Bamboo, with its hollow chambers, resists sinking even when waterlogged. Reeds gathered from marshes and riverbanks can be tied into thick rolls that hold a person above water. Driftwood carried by rivers into estuaries may also be repurposed. These forms are crude, yet they work. They provide the first step into a world where the ocean is not only a boundary, but a highway. Archaeologists cannot uncover the rafts themselves, but they trace the results of their journeys. On islands across Wallacea, obsidian and stone tools show connections between places separated by channels of open sea. Such transport could not have occurred by accident alone. It required intention and preparation. Bundles of wood, carefully arranged and secured, provide a platform sturdy enough for people and perhaps even for fire, carried across to new shores. The use of vines as bindings may seem fragile, but experiments show how strong they can be. Freshly cut lianas, twisted and looped, can hold rafts together for days. Even when they dry and loosen, journeys of tens of kilometers remain possible. Later peoples in Oceania, using similar techniques, build rafts capable of crossing hundreds of kilometers. Though the earliest craft were simpler, the principle was the same: bind, balance, and trust the water to carry. Another approach lies in hollowed logs. With stone axes and fire, humans can shape dugout canoes. Fire softens the wood, which can then be scraped out with flakes of stone. Though slow to make, a hollowed trunk allows steadier travel than a raft, especially on rivers and calm seas. Ethnographic parallels suggest that such canoes may have appeared very early, though evidence remains elusive. Without preserved wood, scholars must rely on possibility rather than proof. Lesser-known traces come not from boats themselves, but from the animals carried across. Archaeological deposits in Timor reveal bones of rats that are not native to the island. These small mammals likely arrived with humans, either as stowaways or as deliberate food resources. Their presence signals repeated crossings, enough to establish new populations. The rats are silent witnesses to the rafts that bore them, reminders of journeys across unseen waters. The mystery deepens when considering navigation. How did early humans aim their fragile craft toward islands beyond the horizon? Some scholars propose that visible land, seen from ridges, guided the way. Others suggest that the movements of seabirds and the patterns of waves offered clues. Observations of how swells reflect from hidden islands could have been learned through experience. The exact methods remain unknown, but the success of human settlement across Sahul proves that some system worked. At the planetary scale, climate once again provides both aid and challenge. Lower seas shorten the gaps, reducing distances between stepping stone islands. Yet winds grow stronger in some seasons, and storms remain fierce. A raft drifting without control may be carried far from its intended course. Still, currents at certain times favor movement towards Sahul. Oceanographers note that seasonal winds blow consistently in one direction, offering natural assistance to those willing to launch. Imagine the distances involved. From the island of Timor to the Sahul coast, the shortest water gap measures nearly 100 kilometers. A raft, drifting with favorable winds, might cover such a distance in a day or two, but without shelter, the journey is harsh. Sun burns the skin, salt stings the eyes, whilst waves soak every surface. For survival, travelers must bring food and water, carried perhaps in gourds or shells. Each successful voyage reflects planning beyond mere chance. Daily life along the coasts prepares humans for such challenges. They already know the rhythm of tides, the behavior of fish, the drift of floating logs. Children grow up watching waves and collecting reeds, while adults fashion tools from bone and stone. Fire becomes essential, not only for cooking, but for hollowing trunks and hardening wooden spears used in fishing. These cumulative skills form the foundation of seafaring. Evidence from Alor Island shows deep-sea fish bones dating back over 40,000 years. Tuna, marlin, and other swift fish appear in the record. Such catches cannot be made from shore. They require hooks, lines, and boats that can venture outward. Though the hooks themselves decay, the bones remain. They whisper of rafts or canoes strong enough to carry humans far from land into waters where shadows of large fish dart beneath. The unresolved question is whether rafts alone explain these achievements. Some scholars argue that dugout canoes must have existed by this time. Others maintain that even simple rafts, if large enough, could support fishing and long crossings. Experiments with modern replicas show that bamboo rafts can travel significant distances, especially when aided by wind. The truth may lie in a mixture. rafts for some tasks, dugouts for others, with constant adaptation to local materials. At the broadest scale, these experiments mark a turning point. For the first time, humans rely not only on walking and climbing, but on floating and paddling. They no longer treat water as an impassable void. Instead, they treat it as a new terrain. Each crossing expands the known world, pushing the boundaries of survival outward. The planet itself, with shifting seas and restless winds, becomes both obstacle and ally, step by step. The use of rafts and reed bundles transforms human possibility. Where once groups remained confined to continents, now they begin to scatter across archipelagos. In time, this knowledge will carry their descendants across entire oceans. But here, in the deep past, the first lashings of vine around bamboo mark the beginning. The simple act of binding wood together opens the way to continents unseen. Thus, the story of human seafaring begins not with great ships or sails, but with fragile rafts. They leave no trace but bones, stones, and the survival of those who reached new shores. And yet, through these silent fragments, the path becomes clear. Across scattered islands, humans built, bound, and trusted the sea, setting the stage for a future in which no horizon would remain unreachable. Across the scattered islands of Wallacea, humans face the greatest challenge of their age. Before them lies the wide stretch of sea that separates Asia from Sahul, the ancient continent that joins Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. No lowering of sea level can ever bridge this distance. The gap remains, broad and deep, demanding courage and invention. Yet, more than 45,000 years ago, humans succeed. They make the crossing to Sahul. The evidence is clear. Archaeological sites in northern Australia reveal human presence by at least 45,000 years ago, perhaps earlier. Stone tools, fireplaces, and fragments of ochre lie in layers of soil that have been carefully dated. These traces prove that humans did not merely drift by accident. They established themselves, built communities, and adapted swiftly to new environments. The journey that brought them here marks one of the boldest achievements in prehistory. At the heart of this story lies the geography of Wallacea. The islands form stepping stones, but never solid bridges. From the Sunda Shelf, people move southward, passing through Flores, Timor, and Alor. Each island brings them closer to Sahul, yet each demands another crossing. The shortest route still involves at least 8 separate voyages, with the largest gap stretching close to 100 kilometers. To succeed, groups must prepare carefully, not only for one journey but for a chain of them. Lesser-known clues of these crossings appear in the DNA of modern populations. Genetic studies show that Aboriginal Australians and Papuans share ancestry with early groups that left Asia more than 50,000 years ago. This genetic signature proves that the crossing to Sahul was not a rare accident but a major migration. Large numbers of people must have travelled enough to establish lasting communities and to carry their genes through tens of thousands of years. Still, many mysteries remain. How did they navigate? Scholars debate the question. Some suggest that groups may have seen the outlines of Sahul from high points on Timor, faint shapes across the horizon. Others argue that deliberate knowledge of currents, stars, and birds guided their voyages. A few even propose that humans may have built simple sails, using woven mats or leaves to catch the wind. The lack of preserved boats leaves no final answer. The ocean itself keeps its secrets. The scale of the task is immense. Imagine a group setting out on raft, carrying fire, water, and food. The sea around them stretches without end. Clouds gather, waves rise, and the horizon disappears. For hours, even days, they paddle or drift. The risk is high. Storms can overturn rafts. Currents can sweep them far from land. Yet, despite these dangers, enough succeed that Sahul becomes home. To cross such distances with Stone Age technology remains one of the greatest feats of human endurance. At the planetary scale, this migration alters the human map forever. For the first time, a continent is settled that was never connected by land to any other. Australia and New Guinea become cradles of distinct human cultures, shaped by unique environments. From this point onward, humanity is no longer limited to continents joined by ice or bridges of earth. They are seafarers, capable of reaching lands across water. Archaeological sites within Sahul reveal how quickly these pioneers spread. In northern Australia, Kitihalat Majid Baby Rock Shelter, stone tools and pigments testify to occupation more than 60,000 years ago, though the dates remain debated. In New Guinea, caves hold traces of early habitation in highlands that rise above forests. These findings suggest that once humans arrived, they dispersed rapidly, adapting to diverse habitats from coasts to mountains. A lesser-known detail comes from extinct animals. When humans first reach Sahul, they encounter megafauna, giant kangaroos, enormous flightless birds, marsupial lions, and wombats the size of small cars. Many of these creatures vanish within a few thousand years of human arrival. Scholars debate whether hunting, habitat change, or climate shifts drove these extinctions. But the timing points strongly to human impact. The crossing to Sahul not only marks a triumph of survival, but also the beginning of profound ecological change. The mystery of numbers lingers. How many people crossed? Genetic models suggest that at least several hundred individuals were needed to maintain viable populations. Such numbers imply organized effort, perhaps repeated journeys over generations. This was no small band swept away by chance. It was a migration, intentional and sustained, whether guided by leaders, rituals, or collective memory. These voyages carried humanity into new realms. The crossing also reshapes human perception of the ocean. No longer is water only a place of food or danger. It becomes a highway, a path to other worlds. With each successful voyage, confidence grows. Children hear stories of ancestors who came from distant islands. Memories of routes and landmarks are passed down. Knowledge of tides, winds, and stars becomes part of culture. In this way, seafaring roots itself in identity. At the global scale, the arrival in Sahul shows that humans can master environments of extraordinary diversity. In New Guinea, dense rainforests challenge survival. In Australia, deserts stretch vast and dry. Coastal zones offer rich shellfish, but inland regions demand new strategies. Within a short span, humans develop techniques for hunting marsupials, gathering plants, and navigating rivers. They learn to use fire to shape landscapes, encouraging growth of certain plants and driving animals into open ground. The adaptability that carried them across seas now sustains them across continents. One unresolved question concerns the timing. Did humans reach Sahul as early as 65,000 years ago, or closer to 45,000? Different dating methods yield different results. Thermoluminescence, radiocarbon, and optically stimulated luminescence each offer range, but uncertainties remain. Scholars continue to refine their methods, yet consensus has not been reached. What is certain is that by 45,000 years ago, people were firmly established, living and thriving on Sahul. The achievement resonates across human history. Later generations will sail across the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and beyond. But here lies the first great test. Crossing to Sahul shows that humans, equipped with nothing more than stone tools and fragile rafts, can defeat distances that once seemed impossible. It marks the dawn of humanity as a maritime species. Thus, the story of the crossing is more than migration. It is transformation. It proves that humans are not bound by land alone. They see the horizon, imagine another shore, and make the leap. The fact that their descendants still live in Australia and New Guinea today testifies to the success of this bold step. The ocean did not stop them. It carried them forward into a new chapter of survival. Between the Asian mainland and the rising lands of Sahul lies a chain of islands that never fused together, even during the deepest stages of the Ice Age. This region is known today as Wallacea, named after the 19th century naturalist Alfred Russel Wallace, though its story began tens of thousands of years earlier. For early humans, Wallacea presents both a challenge and an opportunity. The islands are stepping stones, scattered across deep seas, forming a vital link in humanity's first great oceanic passage. The geography of Wallacea is distinctive. Unlike the Sunda Shelf to the west, where lowered seas unite vast territories into one broad continent, Wallacea is cut through by deep basins. The Banda Sea, the Flores Sea, and the Timor Sea remain barriers of water, never drained even at the lowest glacial levels. To move through this zone, humans must cross from island to island. Each crossing requires preparation, courage, and memory. Yet together, these voyages create a pathway to Sahul. Archaeologists find evidence of early human presence on islands such as Flores, Sulawesi, Timor, and Alor. Stone tools, hearths, and shell middens show that people lived there more than 40,000 years ago, perhaps even earlier. The distribution of these sites indicates that humans did not simply arrive once and remain. They moved repeatedly, crossing channels, establishing camps, and sustaining contact. In this sense, Wallacea functions as a maritime corridor, a space where seafaring knowledge develops in stages. One lesser-known detail is the persistence of other hominin species within this same region. On Flores, the small-bodied Homo floresiensis, sometimes called the hobbits, survive until at least 50,000 years ago. Their presence overlaps with the arrival of modern humans, raising questions about encounters that left no clear record. On Sulawesi, stone tools far older than modern human arrival suggest that yet another hominin group once lived there. Wallacea thus holds not only the story of migration, but also the mystery of coexistence and replacement. At a planetary scale, Wallacea illustrates the complexity of Earth's shifting boundaries as ice sheets expand and contract, coastlines elsewhere grow and shrink. But here, deep tectonic basins prevent land bridges from forming. Even when sea levels fall by more than 100 meters, Wallacea remains a mosaic of islands. This geological fact ensures that any human settlement in Sahul must involve deliberate sea travel. No other migration in the world at this time demands such crossings. The distances between islands vary. Some are only a few kilometers apart, visible from each other's shores. Others are separated by channels of 40 60, or even more than 80 kilometers. From Timor, the coast of Australia lies far across open sea. To reach it, humans must move step by step, from Flores to Alor to Timor, and then onward. Each step requires knowledge of winds and currents. Each step reinforces the skill of building rafts or canoes that can withstand waves. On certain islands, archaeological sites contain unusual materials. Obsidian, a volcanic glass found only in specific locations, appears far from its sources. By analyzing its chemical signature, scientists can trace it to exact volcanoes. Its presence on distant islands shows that humans carried it across water. These are not random drifts of stone, but intentional transport of a valued resource. Obsidian flakes, sharp and efficient, become proof of networks that span Wallacea. Life on the islands themselves demands adaptation. Unlike the Asian mainland, where large mammals roam, Wallacea offers smaller prey and rich marine resources. On Flores, giant storks and dwarf elephants once provided meat, though they soon vanish after human arrival. On other islands, shellfish and fish become staples, leaving behind thick layers of discarded shells in caves. The rhythm of island life ties closely to the sea. Fishing, gathering, and hunting shift with tides and seasons. Firelight on beaches and in caves shows how groups anchor themselves in these places. The unresolved question is whether humans paused in Wallacea for long generations or moved rapidly through. Some scholars argue for swift dispersal, noting the early dates in Australia. Others suggest that Wallacea hosted populations who thrived for millennia, experimenting with boats and fishing methods. The truth may lie between. Some groups pressed on, while others remained, creating a web of communities linked by water. At the broadest scale, Wallacea becomes a testing ground for seafaring. Here, humans learn that seas are not just obstacles but connectors. They observe how birds fly from island to island, how currents shift with monsoons, how clouds gather above unseen land. Knowledge accumulates, passed down through stories and practices. Children grow up watching elders bind bamboo, carve wood, and launch rafts. Each successful crossing becomes part of collective memory, a foundation for future voyages. A lesser-known ecological consequence of these crossings is the spread of small animals. Rats and lizards arrive on islands where they never lived before. Carried accidentally in human cargo, some survive and establish new populations, forever changing local ecosystems. In this way, even unintentional transport reshapes Wallacea. Humans are not only passengers on these seas, they are agents of transformation, carrying life across boundaries. The very existence of Wallacea as a permanent barrier reshapes human evolution. To reach Sahul, humans must pass through this region, adapting skills that will later enable far greater journeys. Without Wallacea, seafaring might have developed more slowly. With it, the challenge is unavoidable, and so, tens of thousands of years before the great Polynesian navigators, humans here become the first to cross seas that no land bridge could close. Today, much of Wallacea remains little studied. Dense forests cover ancient sites, and many lie drowned beneath seas that rose after the Ice Age. Yet every discovery adds to the picture: humans stopping at caves, fishing from coasts, carving tools from imported stone. Each find strengthens the conclusion that Wallacea was not a dead end, but a vital pathway. Thus the scattered islands of Wallacea serve as humanity's first maritime classroom. They teach that survival depends on movement, that seas can be crossed, that knowledge must be remembered. From these lessons, humans step forward to Sahul, carrying not only tools and fire, but the beginnings of a tradition that will one day span the oceans of the world. The scattered islands of Wallacea hold a record unlike any other. They preserve signs of intentional sea crossings that date back more than 45,000 years, perhaps even earlier. These signs are subtle, carved not into wood or rope, which decay, but into stone and shell, which endure. From these fragments, archaeologists reconstruct the first chapters of human seafaring. One of the most striking discoveries lies on the island of Timor. There, in caves that overlook the sea, researchers have uncovered layers of stone tools, fish bones, and shells. Among the bones are species that live only in deep waters, far from shore. Tuna and marlin cannot be caught in tidal pools or shallow reefs. Their presence proves that humans ventured outward in boats or rafts, casting lines into open water. These finds push back the origin of advanced fishing skills by tens of thousands of years. Another piece of evidence comes from obsidian, the volcanic glass used to make sharp blades and points. Each source of obsidian carries a unique chemical signature. By analyzing flakes found on islands like Alor and Sulawesi, scientists can trace them back to distant volcanoes. The results show movement of stone across channels of sea, sometimes more than 100 kilometers wide. Such transport cannot be explained by driftwood or chance currents. It must have been carried by humans who crossed deliberately, bringing valuable material with them. A lesser-known detail emerges from shell ornaments. Beads made from carefully drilled shells have been found in Wallacea, far from coasts where such shells naturally occur. Some beads are buried in caves deep inland, carried across ridges and valleys before being worn or deposited. Their presence suggests that humans not only crossed seas but also valued the symbols of ocean life. The sea becomes part of identity, reflected in the ornaments worn on the body. The mystery is how exactly these journeys were made. No boats survive. Wood, vines, and reeds vanish quickly in humid climates. What remains is speculation guided by experiment. Modern researchers have built rafts from bamboo, lashed with vines, and tested them across Indonesian seas. The results show that such craft are surprisingly stable. A raft of 10 to 12 logs can carry several people, food, and water. With paddles or poles, it can be directed. With sails of woven mats, it can even move with the wind. Though no direct evidence of sails exists for this period, the possibility remains open. At the planetary scale, the presence of humans on remote islands highlights how climate and geography shape opportunity. When sea levels fall, coastlines extend outward, shortening some gaps, yet Wallacea's channels remain deep and permanent. The migration into Sahul proves that humans overcame these fixed barriers. Unlike the frozen land bridges of the north, no glacial pulse ever closes Wallacea. Here, survival requires skill beyond walking. It requires mastery of water. Consider the scale of movement. From Flores to Alor, the crossing may be only a dozen kilometers. From Alor to Timor, it is longer, perhaps 30. From Timor to Sahul, nearly 100 kilometers stretch across open sea. Even with favorable winds and currents, this is a formidable challenge. A raft drifting at 2 kilometers per hour would take more than 2 days to cover the distance. Food, water, and endurance are essential. The fact that people succeeded suggests planning, cooperation, and repeated trials. Daily life along coast prepares them for such undertakings. Children grow up near tides and estuaries, watching how fish gather and how waves break on reefs. Adults sharpen hooks from bone, twist cords from plant fibers, and carry fire into caves. The skills of observation, crafting, and coordination come together in each attempt at crossing. Success is not guaranteed, but each successful voyage passes knowledge to the next generation. Archaeological sites reveal this continuity. On Alor Island, layers of deposits show human occupation over thousands of years. Tools shift in style, fish bones accumulate, and shells pile into middens. These layers speak of stability, not fleeting visits. Humans lived here, fished here, and crossed from here. The islands are not mere stepping stones, they are homes, nodes in a network of maritime life. The unresolved question is how early these crossings began. Some scholars argue that humans may have reached Wallacea more than 60,000 years ago, possibly even earlier. Stone tools found on Sulawesi suggest occupation long before modern humans, perhaps by archaic species. If so, the tradition of seafaring may have roots deeper than we imagine. Did earlier hominins cross seas as well? The answer remains unclear. Without bones or genetic traces, the identity of those toolmakers remains a mystery. At a broader scale, these crossings reshape human history. They show that by the late Pleistocene, humans were already maritime explorers. Long before the great voyages of Polynesia or the Indian Ocean, small groups of hunter-gatherers pushed rafts into unknown waters. Their achievements remind us that exploration does not begin with compasses and sails. It begins with observation, courage, and the will to survive. One lesser-known aspect of these journeys is the spread of fire. Carrying embers across water is difficult, yet essential. Fire provides warmth, light, and cooked food. Without it, survival on new shores is harder. Archaeologists find ancient hearths on islands like Timor, showing that fire was preserved and transported. Perhaps glowing coals were stored in shells, bark, or bundles of resin, kept alive during crossings. The maintenance of fire across seas is itself an act of ingenuity. As seas rise and fall with glacial cycles, many early camps now lie drowned beneath waves. Continental shelves that once held fires and tools are hidden underwater, unreachable by excavation. This loss explains why the record is fragmentary. What remains are the sites on higher ground, caves that escape flooding, and artifacts washed into sediments. Yet even from these fragments, the story shines. Humans in Wallacea did not merely drift. They planned, adapted, and endured. Thus, the signs of early seafaring emerge not from preserved boats, but from the quiet testimony of stone, shell, and bone. They show that humans learned to cross water before history began, linking islands with fragile craft and steady determination. These crossings mark the threshold of a new chapter, where the ocean itself becomes part of human life. On the island of Flores, deep within Wallacea, archaeologists uncover a story that surprises even seasoned researchers. Here, amid limestone caves and forested valleys, once lived a species of humans unlike any other. They are known as Homo floresiensis, often called the hobbits because of their small stature, barely over a meter tall, with skulls much smaller than those of modern humans. They nonetheless made tools, hunted animals, and thrived for hundreds of thousands of years. The discovery of Homo floresiensis in Liangbua Cave in 2003 changed the way scientists understood human diversity. Bones of at least 9 individuals were found, dating to as recently as 50,000 years ago. This means that when modern humans first began to cross Wallacea, another kind of human was still living there. The overlap raises questions that echo to this day. Did our species encounter them? Did we compete or coexist for a time? No direct answers survive, yet the possibility lingers. The landscape of Flores shapes this story. The island is mountainous, with steep ridges and deep gorges. Volcanic activity shapes its soils and rivers. For small-bodied humans, such terrain poses challenges but also offers protection. Isolation on the island allows unique evolutionary pathways. Over thousands of generations, large-bodied ancestors shrink in size, adapting to limited resources. This process, known as island dwarfism, is not unique to humans.
On Flores, elephants too shrink to dwarf forms, some no larger than cattle.
A lesser-known detail is the presence of giant storks and giant rats alongside Homo floresiensis. These unusual animals, part of Flores's unique ecosystem, show how islands create worlds apart from the mainland. The hobbits likely hunted small elephants and giant rats, leaving cut marks on bones that testify to their skill. They also controlled fire, as ash and charcoal layers in caves demonstrate. In this way, despite their small brains, they mastered survival. The mystery lies in their disappearance. Around 50,000 years ago, Homo floresiensis vanished from the record. The timing coincides with the arrival of modern humans in the region. Did our species outcompete them for resources? Did diseases play a role? Or did volcanic eruptions and ecological changes push them beyond survival? No conclusive evidence points to a single cause. Their fate remains an unresolved question in the broader story of human prehistory. At the planetary scale, the persistence of Homo floresiensis shows how diverse human evolution truly is. While glaciers cover the north, while deserts expand and contract, isolated islands harbor unique lineages. Humanity is not one species moving steadily forward, but a branching tree with many experiments. Some branches end, like that of the hobbits. Others merge. As modern humans interbreed with Neanderthals and Denisovans, the Earth holds space for multiple forms of humankind, shaped by geography and time. The presence of hobbits alongside modern humans also reframes the story of seafaring. For early travelers reaching Flores, the island was not empty. It held other beings who made tools, tended fire, and walked upright. Encounters may have been brief, or prolonged, or hostile, or peaceful. We cannot know. But the knowledge that such meetings could have occurred adds depth to the image of humans spreading across Wallacea. Migration was not only into empty lands, but into places already inhabited. Archaeological layers in Liangbua Cave reveal how life changed after the disappearance of Homo floresiensis. Later levels show modern human tools, distinct in form. The transition from one kind of humanity to another is visible in the soil itself. Stone flakes give way to new techniques, hearths grow larger, and remains of hunted animals shift in species. It is as though one chapter closes and another opens, written in ash and bone. A lesser-known clue comes from footprints on nearby islands. On Sulawesi, far older than the hobbits, preserved tracks suggest that yet another unknown hominin once lived there. Their identity is uncertain. They may have been relatives of Homo erectus or another lineage altogether. These traces remind us that the region was home to more than one human form. The spread of modern humans through Wallacea thus takes place within a landscape already rich with human history. the unresolved question of interaction remains central. Did modern humans and hobbits meet face to face? Some scholars suggest that genetic evidence might eventually provide an answer. But so far, no DNA has survived from the hobbit bones. The tropical climate destroys fragile molecules. Without genetic data, we cannot know whether traces of hobbit ancestry remain within us. The silence of the genome keeps the mystery alive. At the scale of human adaptation, Flores shows how flexible survival can be. Small bodies require fewer calories. In an island environment with limited resources, this trait is an advantage. Modern humans, larger and more demanding of food, succeed through cooperation, broader diets, and seafaring links. Different strategies achieve the same goal: persistence on challenging land. The coexistence, however brief, of two strategies on one island exemplifies the variety of human solutions to survival. For the broader world, the story of Flores challenges simple narratives of progress. Intelligence and brain size alone do not determine success. The hobbits, though small-brained, survive for hundreds of thousands of years in isolation. Modern human, though larger-brained, risk extinction when environments shift. The Earth tests every lineage in its own way. Success is not guaranteed. Survival depends on fit between body, land, and resource. Thus, Flores becomes a mirror of human possibility. It shows that the path of evolution branches in unexpected directions. It shows that islands can shape species into forms unseen elsewhere. And it shows that when modern humans spread outward, they did not step into an empty world, but into one already occupied by cousins. The silence of those cousins now deepens the story, reminding us of what was lost as well as what was gained. Life on small islands demands a way of living that differs from life on wide continents. Resources are limited, animals are fewer, and plants grow in fragile balance with the soil. For early humans who reach these scattered places, survival requires constant adjustment. They cannot depend on large herds or vast forests. Instead, they must learn to live with what the island offers, no more and no less. Archaeological remains reveal how these pioneers adapt. In caves across Timor, Alor, and other Wallacean islands, thick layers of shells pile up, evidence of repeated meals drawn from the sea. Shellfish become a staple, reliable in every season, gathered by hand from tidal flats and reefs. Small fish are caught near shore, while bones of deep-water species, like tuna, prove that people also journey outward, casting lines into open water. The sea, more than the land, provides their daily bread. Yet the land contributes as well. Forest clearings offer yams, tubers, and fruits. Traps catch small animals, while bows and spears bring down birds and giant rats. On Flores, the dwarf elephants once provided meat, though they vanish soon after modern humans arrive. Fire is used not only for cooking, but for shaping landscapes, encouraging the growth of certain plants and driving prey into the open. Life on an island is a careful balance between what can be taken and what must be conserved. A lesser-known clue to this balance lies in the bones of giant rats. In many caves, the bones appear in layers that span thousands of years. Cut marks show that humans hunted them repeatedly. Their continued presence suggests that people took them in sustainable numbers, avoiding extinction. These small creatures become a long-term resource, proving that careful hunting strategies allowed survival across generations. The rhythm of life follows the tides. Morning may begin with the gathering of shellfish as waters recede. Afternoon may bring fishing in deeper channels or the digging of roots inland. Evenings center around fire, where food is roasted and shared. Archaeological hearths, built again and again in the same places, mark the constancy of these routines. Ash builds into thick layers, silent records of countless nights spent by flickering flames. The mystery is how communities organize themselves to meet these needs. Do groups move seasonally, shifting from coast to inland as resources change, or do they remain near shores, relying heavily on marine food year-round? The evidence is mixed. Some caves show year-round use, while others suggest seasonal occupation. Perhaps both strategies existed, with flexibility as the key. On islands, rigidity leads to hunger. Adaptability ensures survival. At the planetary scale, islands illustrate the limits of human expansion. On continents, humans can move when resources decline, following herds or seeking new valleys. On islands, the sea closes escape. Groups must learn to endure within boundaries set by geography. Rising seas at the end of glacial periods shrink land even further, compressing habitats and intensifying pressure. The survival of humans in such settings demonstrates resilience under constraint. Another lesser-known detail comes from stone tool styles. On Timor and Alor, archaeologists find microliths, small sharp flakes used in composite tools. These differ from the larger tools found on the mainland. The shift suggests innovation, an adaptation to limited stone supplies. Small flakes stretch resources further, providing sharp edges from modest cores. Such changes reveal the ingenuity required for island living, where every material must be used efficiently. The presence of ornaments also speaks to island life. Shell beads and ochre appear in layers alongside food remains. Even in conditions of scarcity, humans make room for symbolism and identity. The sea is not only a source of food, but also of meaning. Wearing shells around the neck or painting with ochre links the body to the ocean. Life is sustained not only by calories, but by culture. The unresolved question is how isolated these communities truly were. Did groups on one island remain separate from their neighbors, or did regular crossings link them? The presence of obsidian from distant sources suggests contact. Yet the degree of exchange remains uncertain. In times of abundance, perhaps voyages spread goods and ideas. In times of scarcity, perhaps groups withdrew, surviving alone. The shifting balance between isolation and connection defines the human story in Wallacea. At the scale of ecology, humans become a force of change. The extinction of dwarf elephants on Flores and giant birds elsewhere shows the impact of hunting on vulnerable species. Yet the persistence of rats, shellfish, and fish shows the possibility of balance. Islands become laboratories of human interaction with nature, revealing both fragility and resilience. Daily survival is demanding, but the evidence suggests success. By the time humans reach Sahul, they are already practiced in island life. The skills honed in Wallacea, fishing, foraging, toolmaking, and boat building equip them for the challenges of Australia and New Guinea. In this sense, small islands become stepping stones not only in geography but in experience. They train humans to think differently, to plan within limits, to sustain life under pressure. A planetary perspective reminds us that while glaciers shape the world far to the north, here in the tropics humans carve out a different survival. The contrast is striking. In Europe, humans adapt to mammoth hunts and icy steppes. In Wallacea, they master shellfish gathering and sea crossings. Both paths demand ingenuity, but in different forms. The diversity of human strategies across the planet demonstrates the breadth of our adaptability. Thus, the story of life on small islands is not one of hardship alone. It is also one of innovation, resilience, and meaning. Shell beads glint in firelight. Fish bones accumulate in caves. Stone flakes, sharpened from scarce cores, allow work to continue. Each fragment tells of humans who refused to yield to constraint. They made a world for themselves on islands surrounded by endless sea. For humans who move across Wallacea and into Sahul, islands are both blessings and burdens. They provide shelter, safety from large predators, and rich coastal foods. Yet they also trap those who cannot leave, and they magnify the risks of scarcity. To live on an island is to balance between haven and prison, between refuge and constraint. Archaeological traces reveal both sides of this reality. In caves on Timor and Alor, layers of shells and bones suggest steady survival, with people returning season after season to the same shelters. Hearths glow in repeated spots, evidence of community stability. But in other places, sudden breaks appear in the record. Layers that once held signs of occupation grow empty. Perhaps resources collapsed. Perhaps storms destroyed shorelines. Perhaps groups left seeking more abundant lands. The rhythms of settlement rise and fall like the tides themselves. Islands protect in one clear way. They isolate. On continents, humans must contend with predators such as big cats, hyenas, and bears. On many islands, such threats do not exist. The lack of large predators makes coastal life safer, especially for children and small groups. Yet the same isolation that removes dangers also reduces opportunities. If food stocks decline, escape may be impossible. A drought, a storm, or a failed harvest can bring hunger swiftly. One lesser-known clue to these cycles comes from animal extinctions. On islands where dwarf elephants once lived, their bones vanish soon after human arrival. These small elephants, far less wary than mainland herds, likely provided meat for early settlers. Once gone, the resource is lost forever. The disappearance of such species may have triggered crises, forcing groups either to adapt or to leave. Thus, the very safety of isolation carries long-term costs. The mystery lies in how groups balanced these risks. Did they maintain constant contact between islands, ensuring escape routes and supply networks? Or did some remain isolated for generations, trapped by seas and dwindling resources? The record shows both patterns. Obsidian movement proves exchange, yet gaps in habitation layers prove abandonment. The truth may be that island life was never static. Humans shifted, endured, and retreated in cycles shaped by climate and chance. At the planetary scale, the dynamics of islands reflect broader forces. As ice locks water into glaciers, sea levels fall, enlarging islands and joining smaller ones. When climates warm and seas rise, shorelines retreat, cutting islands apart again. Communities that once lived on wide coastal plains may find themselves stranded on shrinking land. Entire landscapes vanish beneath waves, erasing camps, hearths, and paths. To live on an island during the Ice Age is to live at the mercy of global change. Consider the scale of isolation. On some Wallacean islands, land may be only 30 kilometers across, with steep ridges limiting movement even further. Such spaces cannot support large populations. Archaeologists estimate that only a few hundred individuals may have lived on certain islands at any one time. Small groups face constant vulnerability to disease, storms, or accidents. Genetic diversity shrinks, and survival requires either migration or exchange with neighbors. Daily life reflects this tension. Food gathering is constant, with shellfish, roots, and small game forming the core of diet. Fire must be preserved carefully, for without neighbors to borrow from, its loss would be disastrous. Tools must be resharpened and recycled. Since stone sources are limited, every action requires foresight. To waste is to risk hunger. To misjudge is to risk extinction. Island survival is not casual, it is calculated and precise. A lesser-known detail emerges from cut marks on bird bones. On islands where giant flightless birds once lived, humans hunted them persistently. At first, the birds provided abundant food, but as populations dwindled, the risk of overhunting grew. Eventually, many species disappeared. Their loss narrowed diets, pushing humans to rely even more on shellfish and fish. This pattern repeats across many islands. Initial abundance, followed by scarcity, and then adaptation. The unresolved question is how humans viewed their islands. Did they see them as homes, permanent and stable, or as temporary refuges while awaiting the next journey? Archaeological layers suggest both. Some caves show thousands of years of use, while others reveal only brief occupations. Perhaps identity itself was flexible, tied less to fixed territory than to routes across water. To live in Wallacea may have meant being always both resident and voyager. At the broadest ecological scale, humans act as both creators and destroyers. They bring fire, shaping landscapes with controlled burns. They introduce animals, whether deliberately or as stowaways. They eliminate species, altering food webs. Yet they also sustain long-term resources, such as shellfish beds, through careful harvesting. Islands amplify every choice. Where continents absorb mistakes, islands magnify them. The survival of humans across Wallacea proves that many choices were wise, even if some led to irreversible losses. The duality of islands as traps and havens also prepares humans for greater challenges ahead. When they eventually move into Sahul, they encounter deserts, forests, and mountains. The lessons of balance learned on Wallacean islands, how to adapt diets, conserve resources yet endure isolation, equip them for these larger landscapes. Island life becomes a rehearsal for continental survival. A planetary observation underscores this. During the Ice Age, humanity is not one uniform population marching forward. In Europe, people adapt to tundra. In Africa, they master savannas. In Wallacea, they refine the art of island living. Each environment shapes human strategies, creating diversity within unity. The success of humanity as a whole depends on the accumulation of these varied experiences. Thus, the story of islands is a story of tension. They protect, but they confine. They nourish, but they restrict. They sustain, but they demand vigilance. Archaeological traces, the bones of rats, the shells of oysters, the vanished remains of elephants, capture this balance. They show that humans lived fully within their means, sometimes succeeding, sometimes failing, always adapting. In the end, islands are both traps and havens because they are both fragile and resilient. They test humans in ways that continents do not, forcing them to reckon with the limits of nature. Those who endure carry forward lessons of patience, care, and foresight. And those lessons echo far beyond the scattered islands of Wallacea, shaping the path of humanity across the seas. On the margins of ocean shores, far from the centers of continents, the presence of humans is revealed by fire. Hearths of ash, rings of charcoal, and scorched stones remain in caves and on beaches across Wallacea and Sahul. These are the quiet traces of lives lived at the edge of the sea. They mark not only survival, but also resilience. To make and preserve fire in such conditions is to hold on to security against cold, darkness, and storm. Archaeological layers show how persistent these fires were. In caves such as Jeremali on Timor, repeated hearths form dark bands in the soil. Each band represents nights spent beside flames, families clustered around warmth, meals cooked, and tools hardened. While storms raged outside and waves broke on reefs, humans kept embers alive. Fire becomes the constant companion, a line of continuity stretching across centuries. The act of maintaining fire across islands is itself remarkable. To carry embers over water requires planning. Coals might be wrapped in bark or resin, protected from waves and wind. In some cases, and groups may have rekindled fire from sparks struck with stone. But the evidence suggests that people worked to keep it alive. Ashes in caves show no long gaps, only steady presence. The survival of fire mirrors the survival of the people themselves. A lesser-known detail comes from the use of shell as fuel. On some islands with little wood, thick piles of burned shell suggest that humans may have added shells to fires to prolong heat. The calcium carbonate within shell reflects heat back, making fires more efficient. This practice, rarely noted, reveals ingenuity in adapting to resource constraints. Even the debris of meals becomes part of the technology of survival. The mystery lies in the role of firelight in human gatherings. Did these hearths serve only practical needs, or did they also carry symbolic weight? Firelight creates space for stories, rituals, and memory. Though no direct evidence survives, many anthropologists believe that the persistence of hearths in the same spots hints at more than cooking. Fire binds groups together, forming centers of community life that endure across generations. At the planetary scale, the use of fire on ocean shores reveals the global spread of a defining human trait. While glaciers stretch across Europe and mammoths roam the steppe, humans in Wallacea sit beside flames on sandy beaches. Fire links all branches of humanity. It is the universal tool, spanning environments from Arctic tundra to tropical coasts. It marks the human presence more clearly than any other artifact. The setting of these fires is unique. Imagine a cave opening toward the sea, waves pounding outside, wind carrying salt spray. Inside, a circle of stones surrounds glowing embers. Around it lie shells, bones, and stone flakes. Smoke rises and darkens the ceiling, leaving stains that endure for thousands of years. Such images are not fiction, but reconstructions built from evidence found in excavations. The hearth is a fixed point in the shifting world of migration. Consider the scale of endurance. Some caves show occupation spanning tens of thousands of years. Generations return to the same places, rekindling fire on old ash. In Liangbua, in Jeremali, in countless smaller shelters. The rhythm repeats: gather fuel, light flames, cook food, share warmth. Fire becomes the anchor of daily life, the point around which all else turns. Without it, survival on islands with wet winds and damp nights would be far more difficult. Daily practices surrounding fire reveal adaptation. On coasts with abundant driftwood, large fires burn bright. On smaller islands with scarce wood, fires are smaller, carefully tended. In some sites, burned coral fragments suggest experimentation with alternative fuels. Humans test, adjust, and remember what works. Fire management becomes a skill as important as boat building or fishing. A lesser-known clue lies in the preservation of pigments. Ochre fragments, heated and altered by fire, appear in cave layers alongside tools. This suggests that fire served not only for warmth, but also for processing materials. Heated ochre changes color and texture, making it easier to grind and apply. Whether used for body painting, decoration, or symbolic marks, this practice links firelight to expression. Even in conditions of scarcity, humans make space for meaning. The unresolved question is how far fire shaped navigation itself. Did groups carry fire as a beacon on rafts at night? Did firelight on a shore serve as a signal to those still at sea? Some researchers suggest that flickering flames might have guided landings, though proof remains elusive. Still, the possibility ties firelight to the very act of seafaring, making it both tool and symbol of passage. At the broad ecological scale, fire reshapes island environments. Controlled burns clear vegetation, encouraging the growth of certain plants. Ash enriches soils, altering nutrient cycles. Charcoal deposits in sediments testify to widespread human influence. On islands as small as Timor and Flores, even modest fires change the balance of ecosystems. Humans are not passive inhabitants. They are agents who transform landscapes through flame. The endurance of fire across so many sites demonstrates resilience. Despite storms, scarcity of fuel, and isolation, humans never let the flame vanish. Each generation inherits the knowledge of tending coals, collecting wood, and protecting sparks. Fire embodies continuity in a world of constant change. The same light that flickers on Sahul's shores flickers also in Africa's caves and Europe's valleys. It is the shared inheritance of all humankind. At the planetary level, the image is striking. While glaciers grind across continents and seas rise and fall, small clusters of humans sit beside fires on remote coasts. Stars wheel overhead, waves crash nearby, and still the flame persists. Fire becomes the quiet counterpoint to the immensity of the earth. It is small, fragile, yet enduring. It symbolizes the human ability to carve stability out of instability. The story of firelight on ocean shores is not only about survival, it is about identity. To keep fire alive is to remain human. No matter how remote the island or how great the sea, archaeological hearths preserved in layers of ash are more than debris. They are the testimony of resilience carried across waters, kindled anew, and protected through nights of wind and rain. They remind us that in the deep past, as today, light in the darkness marks the presence of humanity. On coasts where waves break against reefs and tides draw back to reveal shining flats, humans not only find food, but also beauty. From these shores come shells, polished by the sea, spiraled and colored in ways that catch the eye. Long before metals or gems are valued, shells become objects of meaning. They are drilled, strung, and worn, transformed from food, remains into symbols. In Wallacea and Sahul, such ornaments tell of how the ocean enters human identity. Archaeological discoveries show this clearly. In caves on Timor and Alor, small beads made of shells lie in layers dated more than 40,000 years old. Each bead is carefully shaped, a hole pierced through its center. These were not tools, nor mere waste. They were adornments worn on the body, perhaps as necklaces or bracelets. Their presence demonstrates that humans on remote islands invested time in creating objects that served no practical survival purpose, but carried social or symbolic weight. A lesser-known detail emerges from the distances these shells sometimes traveled. In certain sites, beads are made from species that do not live nearby. This means they were carried from one coast to another, perhaps exchanged between groups, perhaps transported deliberately during migrations. In either case, the act of carrying ornaments across water links them to the very journeys that define this chapter of human history. Shells become tokens of connection, bridging islands as surely as rafts do. The mystery lies in what these beads meant. Did they signal group identity, marking who belonged and who did not? Did they serve as gifts, exchanged to strengthen alliances between distant communities? Or were they personal expressions, worn for beauty or comfort? Archaeologists cannot answer with certainty. The holes drilled into shells speak only of intent, not of meaning. Yet the persistence of such ornaments across time suggests that symbolism was integral to life. At the planetary scale, the making of shell ornaments connects island peoples to a broader human tradition. From Africa to Europe, from deserts to tundras, humans shape beads, pendants, and pigments. Symbolic behavior is one of the hallmarks of our species, appearing wherever people settle. On the shores of Wallacea, the ocean provides the raw material, embedding marine life into the heart of cultural expression, while glaciers tower in the north. Here, shells carry the memory of waves. Consider the scale of effort behind each bead. A shell must be selected, its surface ground or pierced, its hole widened with stone or bone. The work requires time and patience, qualities not easily spared in environments of scarcity. Yet humans devote themselves to this task. The decision to craft ornament from shell reflects more than idle activity. It reflects a commitment to identity, to connection, to meaning beyond immediate need. Daily life integrates these ornaments into rhythm. A child may watch as an elder drills holes, learning the technique. Beads may be worn during gatherings, catching the glow of firelight in caves. They may be buried with the dead, though direct evidence of burials in Wallacea remains rare. Each bead carries a story, not only of the shellfish once eaten, but of the cultural value later imposed upon its remains. A lesser-known clue to this symbolic use of shells comes from ochre stains found on some beads. The presence of pigment suggests that shells were not merely drilled and strung, but also colored. Bright red ochre, ground and applied, enhances the appearance of pale shell, making it stand out against skin or fiber. This combination of materials, stone, pigment, shell, illustrates the integrated creativity of early island societies. The unresolved question is how widespread such symbolism was. Were shell beads common possessions, worn by all, or rare items restricted to certain individuals? The archaeological record is too thin to answer. Some sites contain many beads, others only a few. Scholars debate whether the ornaments reflect egalitarian sharing or social differentiation. What is clear is that even in marginal environments, humans did not abandon symbolic life. They brought it with them across seas, into caves, and onto beaches. At the broadest ecological scale, shells also speak of relationship to the ocean. They are not inert stones, but the remains of once living creatures. To wear them is to carry the sea upon the body. Perhaps this act symbolized the dependence of islanders on marine life, or their respect for the waters that sustained them. In this way, the ocean was not only a source of sustenance, but also a source of meaning, woven into the fabric of identity. In planetary perspective, this intertwining of survival and symbolism is significant. While humans in colder regions invest time in making tailored clothing or shaping mammoth ivory, humans in Wallacea devote effort to marine ornaments. Each environment shapes the form of symbolic life. Yet the impulse is the same: to express, to connect, to carry meaning beyond survival. It is this shared impulse that unites humanity across continents and climates. Archaeological hearths containing beads alongside food remains strengthen this connection. As fires burn, people eat shellfish, discard shells, and select some for drilling. In this way, the transition from food to symbol is direct. What sustains the body also sustains the mind and spirit. The integration of shell into both diet and decoration captures the full cycle of human relationship with the sea. A lesser-known aspect of shell use is their potential role in trade. Even without permanent markets, ornaments may have traveled between groups, passed as gifts or tokens of trust. Obsidian and shell beads often appear together in sites, suggesting that networks of exchange included both practical and symbolic goods. To give a bead may have been to create a bond, a small act that carried weight across generations. Thus, shell beads and ornaments reveal a vital truth. Humans are never content with survival alone. Even in environments where resources are limited, where seas must be crossed and dangers endured, people still craft beauty. They still invest time in symbols that connect them to one another and to the world around them. The sea gives food, but it also gives meaning, and meaning is as essential as nourishment. When humans reach islands across Wallacea and finally Sahul, they encounter animals unlike any they have known before. Isolation has shaped these creatures into unique forms, some giant, some miniature, each adapted to worlds without predators like lions or tigers. For the first time, modern humans stand face to face with island giants, dwarf elephants, giant birds, and marsupial predators that have never learned fear of humankind. Their fates become entwined with the survival of the new arrivals. On Flores, long before modern humans set foot there, small elephants known as Stegodon florensis insularis roam the valleys. Barely a fraction of the size of mainland elephants, they evolved into dwarf forms because of limited resources. These elephants provide meat and materials for tools, but they disappear soon after modern humans arrive. Cut marks on bones and burned remains suggest hunting played a role. The loss of the dwarf elephants removes a major food source, forcing humans to turn even more to shellfish and small animals. In Sahul, the scale of creatures is even more dramatic. When humans first enter Australia, they encountered giant kangaroos taller than any living species, enormous wombats the size of cars, and flightless birds heavier than ostriches. The marsupial lion, with powerful jaws and sharp claws, stalks forests. Diprotodons, massive plant-eaters, browse across plains. For tens of thousands of years, these animals shaped ecosystems without pressure from humans. Now, with hunters skilled in fire and stone tools, their stability begins to unravel. A lesser-known detail comes from the bones of Genyornis newtoni, a giant bird that once laid enormous eggs across Australia. Burn marks on fragments of these eggs suggest that humans collected and cooked them. Each egg may have fed several people, making them a valuable resource. But the harvesting of eggs in large numbers could have prevented reproduction, pushing the species toward extinction. Here, simple acts of daily survival carry consequences for entire lineages. The mystery of these extinctions remains debated. Did humans hunt the animals directly into oblivion, or did climate shifts at the end of the Ice Age play a decisive role? Some scholars argue for a combination. As climates warmed and dried, habitats shrank. At the same time, human hunting and fire use placed additional pressure. The disappearance of giant animals across Sahul within a few thousand years of human arrival suggests that people played a significant part. Yet no single cause fully explains the pattern. At the planetary scale, these island extinctions mirror broader processes happening worldwide. In North America and Eurasia, mammoths, mastodons, and giant ground sloths vanish after human arrival. On islands, where animals are especially vulnerable, the pattern is sharper and faster. Isolation protects species from predators for millennia, but it also leaves them unprepared for new threats. Humans, with their adaptability and cooperation, become the decisive factor in reshaping ecosystems. Daily life on islands intertwines with these encounters. Imagine groups hunting small elephants on Flores, driving them toward traps with fire. Picture families gathering giant eggs, carrying them back to caves to roast over flames. Scenes like these, reconstructed from evidence, show how extraordinary animals become part of ordinary routines, yet the consequences accumulate. Each hunt, each fire, each harvest nudges species toward disappearance. A lesser-known clue comes from coprolites, or fossilized dung, of extinct animals in Sahul. In layers where these appear, pollen studies reveal shifts in vegetation soon after humans arrive. Fire-tolerant plants increase, suggesting that humans use controlled burns to shape landscapes. Such fires may have reduced food sources for large animals, accelerating their decline. In this way, human impact is indirect as well as direct, altering environments as well as hunting prey. The unresolved question is whether humans recognized the role they played. Did they notice that elephants, birds, marsupials grew fewer as years passed? Did they adjust their hunting or gathering in response? Or did changes happen slowly enough that each generation accepted the world as it was, never realizing what had been lost? Archaeology offers no answers. Silence in the record leaves us to wonder how awareness unfolded. At a broad ecological level, the extinction of island giants has cascading effects. Without elephants to clear vegetation, forests thicken. Without giant birds, seed dispersal changes. Without large marsupials, smaller species expand into niches once filled by giants. Humans adapt, but ecosystems transform. Islands become places of new balance, shaped by the absence of creatures that once dominated. For humans, the loss of large prey demands innovation. Shellfish gathering intensifies. Fishing methods expand, including forays into deeper waters. Rats, birds, and reptiles become staple foods. Fire use shapes landscapes to encourage smaller game. Symbolic life continues as well, with shell beads and ochre persisting in archaeological sites. Even as giants vanish, culture endures. The adaptability of humans ensures survival where other species fail. At the planetary scale, this adaptability sets humans apart. No other predator reshapes ecosystems so quickly or so thoroughly. The arrival of people on islands marks turning points in evolutionary history. Species that once endured for millions of years vanish within centuries. Others adapt, thriving in the presence of humans. The outcome is uneven, yet the pattern is unmistakable. Wherever humans go, change follows. One lesser-known detail highlights the spread of fire stick farming in Sahul. Aboriginal traditions of controlled burning, still practiced in some regions, may trace back to these early periods. By burning grasslands, people create fresh growth that attracts kangaroos and other prey. Over time, this practice alters entire landscapes, replacing dense forests with mosaics of open woodland. The line between hunting strategy and ecosystem engineering blurs. Thus, the story of extinctions on islands is not only about loss, but also about transformation. It shows the power of small groups of humans, armed with stone tools and fire, to alter worlds forever. It shows that survival on islands involves choices that ripple outward into ecosystems. And it shows that even in the deep past, humanity's presence carries weight beyond its numbers. At the close of the Ice Age, the Earth warms, glaciers retreat, oceans swell, and coastlines shift once again. For humans who live on scattered islands and low coastal plains, these changes are not distant abstractions. They unfold before their eyes, generation after generation. Lands that once stretched wide are drowned, rivers lengthen into estuaries, and stepping stone islands vanish beneath rising seas. Entire worlds are lost, leaving only memories in stories and traces beneath the waves. Archaeologists now piece together this hidden geography. During the height of the Ice Age, sea levels lay more than 100 meters lower than today. Continental shelves stretched outward, connecting islands and exposing fertile plains. The Sunda Shelf joined mainland Southeast Asia to Sumatra, Java, and Borneo, forming a single landmass. To the south, the Sahul continent united Australia, New Guinea, and Tasmania. Between them, Wallacea remained a chain of islands, but even there, coasts extended further. Humans could walk across plains that today lie deep underwater. As the world warms after 20,000 years ago, seas rise steadily. By 15,000 years ago, shorelines retreat. By 10,000 years ago, many low-lying plains vanish. Islands once linked by dry ground are cut apart. Channels widen, isolating communities that once exchanged goods and knowledge. The geography of migration changes, locking people into new configurations. A lesser-known detail lies in the drowned rivers of these shelves. Sonar mapping of seabeds reveals ancient channels, now filled with sediment, that once carried freshwater across vast plains. These rivers would have provided fertile valleys for settlement, hunting, and gathering. They also would have guided humans as they moved across exposed shelves. Their submergence erases entire landscapes of human history, making the archaeological record incomplete. The mystery is how humans perceived these transformations. Did they notice seas rising year by year, or did the pace seem invisible within a lifetime? Geological records suggest that at times, sea levels rose by more than a meter in a single century. Such change could have been noticeable, with camps flooded, fishing grounds lost, and familiar landmarks submerged. Oral traditions among indigenous peoples of Australia and the Pacific later describe drowned lands and shifting coasts, suggesting memory of these events may have endured across millennia. At the planetary scale, the rising seas reshape not only Wallacea and Sahul but the entire world. In North America, The land bridge of Beringia narrows and eventually disappears beneath waves, cutting the link to Asia. In Europe, the North Sea floods Doggerland, once a rich plain between Britain and the continent. On every shore, humans face the same reality. The ocean, once pulled back by ice, now advances. The boundaries of human life shrink, and adaptation becomes essential. Consider the scale of loss. The Sunda Shelf alone covers an area larger than modern Europe. For tens of thousands of years, humans likely hunted, gathered, and built shelters there. All of that history now lies beneath shallow seas. The lack of access means we may never uncover the full story of early settlement. Stone tools, hearths, and ornaments lie sealed under silt, unreachable except by advanced underwater archaeology. What we know is only a fraction of what was lived. Daily survival during this transition requires adjustment. As coasts drown, people shift to higher ground. Fishing strategies adapt to longer estuaries and deeper waters. Rafts and canoes become more essential than ever, connecting communities now separated by widened straits. The very act of travel changes, with journeys lengthened and risks increased. What was once a walk across plains becomes a voyage across sea. A lesser-known clue comes from shell middens that suddenly change in composition. In some sites, species of shellfish disappear from the record as their habitats drown. Others appear for the first time as new coastlines create fresh ecological zones. These shifts in diet mark the human response to environmental transformation. They reveal resilience as familiar foods vanish. People turn to new ones, sustaining continuity through change. The unresolved question is whether rising seas caused migrations outward. Did people leave drowned shelves and push further into the Pacific? Did the loss of land create pressures that encouraged exploration? Some scholars suggest that the peopling of distant Oceania may have roots in these environmental challenges. The ocean takes, but it also beckons. Humans may have turned necessity into opportunity, pushing beyond the limits of earlier generations. At the broadest ecological scale, sea level rise also reshapes animal life. Lowland habitats shrink, concentrating species into smaller zones. Mangroves spread into new estuaries, altering coastal ecosystems. Coral reefs, once stranded above low seas, revive as waters rise. Humans, always attentive to such shifts, adjust hunting and gathering accordingly. They follow fish into new shallows, gather fruits from forests that retreat upslope, and burn landscapes to manage regrowth. The drowned worlds also carry cultural consequences. As islands become isolated, languages diverge. Communities that once shared traditions grow apart. Genetic drift intensifies, creating distinct lineages. Archaeological records on high ground show variation in tool styles, reflecting this growing separation. In this sense, rising seas do more than erase land. They create diversity, scattering human cultures into new forms. At the planetary level, the transformation is profound. In only a few thousand years, coastlines settle into roughly their modern shape. Continents and oceans assume the outlines we recognize today. But for those living through it, the process is not abstract. It is immediate, lived in flooded camps, shifting resources and ecoation vanished landmark. The world they inherit differs dramatically from that of their grandparents. The story of shifting seas and drowned worlds is one of both loss and renewal. Humans lose plains and rivers, but they gain coasts and reefs. They lose paths across dry ground, but they expand skills of seafaring. They lose familiar places, but they create new identities shaped by isolation. The ocean, in its rise, does not end human life on islands, it transforms it. Beneath the skin of modern populations lies a record of journeys long past. In the DNA of peoples living today in Australia, New Guinea, and nearby islands, scientists find traces of encounters with other ancient humans. These genetic fragments reveal that the crossings of Wallacea and the settlement of Sahul were not isolated events, but part of a wider web of contact with species now vanished. The genes themselves carry memories of meetings on distant shores. One of the most striking discoveries comes from the analysis of Denisovan DNA. Denisovans, known only from a few bones and teeth found in Siberia and Tibet, leave little fossil trace. Yet their legacy endures in the genomes of modern humans. Populations in Melanesia and parts of Australia carry up to 5% Denisovan ancestry. This means that when modern humans crossed into Sahul, their ancestors had already met and interbred with Denisovans somewhere along the route, likely in Southeast Asia. A lesser-known detail is that different groups of Denisovans may have existed, separated by geography. Genetic studies suggest that the Denisovan DNA in Melanesians differs from that found in East Asians, hinting at multiple encounters. The implication is that Denisovans were not a single, small population, but a widespread presence across Asia, encountered at different times and places. These meetings shaped the genetic landscape of people who moved into Wallacea and beyond. The mystery remains where exactly these encounters took place. Fossils are scarce in tropical regions, where bones decay quickly. No Denisovan skeleton has yet been found in Southeast Asia, yet the genetic evidence is undeniable. Somewhere in the forests, caves, or islands of this region, modern humans met Denisovans, exchanged genes, and carried that legacy forward. The land itself hides the physical remains, but the genome preserves the story. At the planetary scale, these genetic traces illustrate how interconnected human evolution truly is. Modern humans are not a pure lineage, spreading unchanged across the globe. Instead, they are mosaics, shaped by contact with other humans. Neanderthals in Europe and Western Asia, Denisovans in the East, and perhaps others still unknown. The survival of humanity owes as much to this blending as to migration itself. Consider the scale of inheritance. Genes from Denisovans contribute to traits that affect immunity, adaptation to altitude, and metabolism. In Tibetans, a Denisovan-derived gene helps people live in thin mountain air. In Melanesians, similar fragments may play roles in immune responses to tropical diseases. Thus, ancient encounters leave practical benefits that persist into the present. Interbreeding was not only a passing event, but a long-term influence on survival. Daily life for the early island settlers would have been unchanged by knowledge of genes, yet shaped by the outcomes, immunity, fertility, and resilience, all influenced by genetic inheritance, helped groups thrive in challenging environments. Though they could not see the DNA within their cells, its effects echoed in their ability to endure. Every successful crossing, every birth, every adaptation carried the unseen imprint of ancient encounters. A lesser-known clue to these contacts lies in the diversity of stone tool traditions. On some islands, tool types differ significantly from those on nearby shores, hinting at influence from distinct populations. While direct links to Denisovans cannot be proven, the variation suggests that cultural as well as genetic exchange may have occurred. Humans did not only blend biologically, they may also have shared knowledge, methods, and styles. The unresolved question is whether these encounters were peaceful or violent. Did groups of modern humans and Denisovans live together for extended periods, forming families, or were meetings rare and tense, with brief contacts leaving genetic traces? Archaeology offers no answer. The genome alone cannot reveal the context. The silence of the past leaves only possibilities. At the broadest ecological scale, these genetic legacies highlight the adaptability of humanity as a species. The spread into Sahul required skills in seafaring, fishing, and foraging, but it also depended on the biological toolkit carried within bodies. Genes inherited from Denisovans may have provided advantages against diseases or environmental stresses. Migration is thus both cultural and biological, shaped by choices and by inherited capacities. Planetary change frames this story. As glaciers wax and wane, as seas rise and fall, humans move through shifting landscapes. Along the way, they meet others, different in form, yet close enough to interbreed. Each meeting adds to the mosaic, strengthening the lineage that will persist. By the time humans reach Sahul, they carry not only their own ancestry, but the legacy of vanished cousins. Consider the scale of endurance. For tens of thousands of years, these genetic traces remain hidden, passed silently from parent to child. Only in recent decades have scientists uncovered them through sequencing. The survival of such fragments across so many generations testifies to their value. Neutral or harmful genes vanish over time, but useful ones remain. The persistence of Denisovan DNA shows that it aided survival in specific environments. Daily practices of island life, fishing, hunting, gathering, thus rest on foundations deeper than culture alone. Beneath the visible actions lies the invisible inheritance of genes shaped by earlier encounters. The success of humans in Wallacea and Sahul is not only a story of rafts and shells, but also of biology carried within. A lesser-known observation is that some island populations today carry genetic variants absent in mainland groups, further evidence of ancient mixing. These unique patterns remind us that islands are not only isolated, but also crucibles of diversity. Each crossing, each encounter, each adaptation leaves marks that persist. The unresolved mystery is whether other hominin groups contributed as well. Some genetic studies hint at unknown lineages, ghost populations that left traces without leaving fossils. Wallacea, with its fragmentary record, may hide such secrets. If so, the human story here is even richer, with chapters yet undiscovered. At the planetary level, the blending of genes across continents and islands underscores the unity of humankind. Despite differences, all modern people carry fragments of ancient cousins. These links bind us to a broader human family that once walked the earth in many forms. The diversity of the past lives on in the unity of the present. Thus, the story of genes across the waves shows that migration is not only movement of bodies, but also of inheritance. Ancient encounters persist in every breath and heartbeat of descendants. They are reminders that the sea did not isolate completely. Across water and land, humans met, mingled, and carried forward the strength of many lineages. The journey into Sahul was not undertaken alone. It was shared in ways both visible and unseen. Across the scattered seas of Wallacea and the wide expanse of Sahul, the human journey reaches a new horizon. Step by step, crossing by crossing, small groups transform into enduring populations. What begins with fragile rafts and uncertain voyages becomes a lasting presence on distant shores, Humanity, once confined to Africa and Eurasia, now thrives at the edge of the Pacific. The endurance of these early settlers marks the close of one great chapter and the opening of another. Archaeological sites across northern Australia, New Guinea, and nearby islands confirm this expansion. Hearths glow in caves, stone tools scatter across plains, and ochre pigments mark walls. Each fragment testifies to resilience. By 45,000 years ago, humans lived not only on coasts but deep inland, in mountains and deserts. The crossing of seas has become the foundation of a new way of life. A lesser-known detail comes from the rapidity of this spread. In Australia, sites thousands of kilometres apart show evidence of occupation within a few millennia of first arrival. This suggests swift dispersal, with groups moving across diverse environments, from tropical forests to arid deserts within a short span. Such speed indicates confidence, adaptability, and determination. The lessons of island life and sea travel prepare humans for vast continental challenges. The mystery remains how knowledge of routes and resources was shared. Did groups move as single waves, or in repeated pulses over centuries? Some scholars argue for rapid colonization, while others propose slower processes with pauses in Wallacea. Genetic and archaeological evidence continues to refine the debate. What is certain is that humans reached the furthest edges of habitable land, establishing themselves in regions previously untouched by our species. At the planetary scale, the settlement of Sahul represents the expansion of humanity into its broadest range yet, from glacial steppes in Europe to tropical islands in Asia, and now to deserts, forests, and coasts of Australia and New Guinea. Humans occupy nearly every environment. This spread demonstrates the global adaptability of the species. While climate, seas, and ecosystems shift, humans endure, adjusting tools, diets, and strategies. Consider the scale of the crossings that made this possible. The voyage from Timor to Sahul spans nearly 100 kilometers of open water. To complete such a journey, groups must build stable craft, store food, and preserve fire. Each crossing represents not only courage but planning. Over time, repeated successes turn risk into tradition. Children grow up hearing of islands beyond the horizon, learning the skills to reach them. The ocean becomes not a boundary, but a familiar path. Daily life in Sahul reflects this transformation. In northern Australia, people hunt giant kangaroos and gather fruits from monsoon forests. In New Guinea, they cultivate yams and taro in fertile valleys, among some of the earliest examples of plant management in the world. Along coasts, shell middens pile high, evidence of enduring reliance on the sea. Everywhere, fire shapes the landscape, guiding animals and encouraging plants. A lesser-known clue comes from ancient rock art. In Arnhem Land, in northern Australia, paintings dated more than 20,000 years old depict animals, humans, and symbols. These artworks prove that cultural expression flourished alongside survival. The same hands that fished, hunted, and built fires also painted, leaving marks that endure across millennia. Art, like seafaring, becomes part of identity. The unresolved question is how much contact persisted between islands after settlement. Did groups in New Guinea remain linked to Wallacea, exchanging goods and genes, or did seas widen and isolate them as levels rose? The presence of genetic diversity suggests both continuity and separation, with some connections sustained and others severed. The shifting map of seas ensured that human networks were always in flux. At the ecological scale, The arrival of humans transforms Sahul's landscapes. Firestick farming alters forests, creating mosaics of open grassland. Hunting pressures contribute to the disappearance of megafauna, diprotodons, giant kangaroos, marsupial lions. The extinction of these species reshapes ecosystems, forcing adaptation to smaller game. Humans, as both predator and engineer, drive ecological change. The balance of life tilts, and new patterns emerge. Planetary observations underscore how remarkable this achievement is. While ice sheets still cover parts of the northern hemisphere, humans in the south live in warm forests and dry deserts, thousands of kilometers from their ancestral homeland. In less than 30 millennia, humans have spread from Africa to nearly the ends of the earth. The endurance of this expansion foreshadows all later journeys, from the settlement of the Americas to the voyages across the Pacific. Another lesser-known detail is the persistence of Denisovan DNA in modern island and Sahul populations. This genetic legacy, carried invisibly within cells, shows that migration is not only cultural but biological. Ancient encounters shape immunity, metabolism, and adaptation. The ocean carries not just boats and beads, but also genes, ensuring that diversity spreads as surely as people do. The unresolved mystery concerns the nature of the earliest crossings into Australia itself. Did groups arrive in small numbers over centuries, or in one large pulse of migration? Models differ, and archaeological sites provide only fragments of an answer. What is clear is that once people established themselves, they flourished. From deserts to coasts, they endured, proving that the leap across the sea was more than an experiment. It was the beginning of permanence. Daily practices continue to reflect both continuity and change. Shell beads and ochre remain, connecting communities to the ocean and to symbolic life. Fishing expands, with evidence of hooks and deep-sea species. Stone tools diversify, adapted to local environments. Songs and stories, though unrecorded in archaeology, likely encode memory of roots, resources, and ancestors. Culture weaves survival into identity, ensuring transmission across generations. At the planetary scale, this final step into Sahul closes the first great wave of human oceanic expansion. It shows that even in the late Pleistocene, with only stone and fire, humanity possessed the ingenuity to cross open seas and settle continents. The endurance of their descendants across tens of millennia into the present day proves the success of that bold move. Thus, the story of endurance across the blue horizon is one of transformation. Humans begin as walkers on plains and end as voyagers across seas. They face traps and havens, extinctions and opportunities, and through it all they adapt. The presence of their descendants today, still living in Australia and New Guinea, is the final evidence of their triumph. The horizon, once a barrier, becomes a doorway, and through that doorway, humanity steps into a wider world carrying fire, memory, and resilience. The story of how early humans survived on remote islands closes not with an ending, but with a horizon that stretches endlessly outward. Across Wallacea and into Sahul, people learned to see water not as a limit, but as a path. They built rafts from bamboo, carried fire across waves, and gathered shells that became symbols of identity. Each action, simple in itself, added to a chain of endurance that spanned tens of thousands of years. Much remains hidden beneath the sea. Plains where rivers once flowed, Camps where fires once burned and routes once walked now lie drowned under meters of water. The ocean keeps those memories silent and unrevealed. Archaeologists trace fragments, shell beads in caves, bones of extinct animals, obsidian from distant volcanoes, yet the full picture will always be incomplete. Mystery is part of the story, as much as fact. At the planetary scale, these journeys remind us of the fragility and strength of humankind. Glaciers rise and fall, seas advance and retreat, ecosystems shift. Yet across every change, people endure. They adapt not only in body, but in mind, carrying knowledge, culture, and symbols wherever they go. The survival of their descendants across Australia, New Guinea, and countless islands is living proof of that resilience. Far away in time, those first fires on ocean shores still glow in imagination. They flicker against cave walls, mirrored by starlight on waves. They remind us that even at the edge of the unknown, humans found a way to persist. And in that persistence lies the heart of our shared story, always moving forward, always shaping life against the vastness of Earth.